Good evening, everyone. Dr. Nathan Culver, and I'm excited to be with you tonight. This is our pre-game conversation around the Influence Summit, which we are looking forward to next Friday and Saturday, the 21st and 22nd of February. One of our guests is someone that I absolutely love. Had the privilege of um, of meeting him a couple of years ago, and we've just kind of been connected ever since. I want to introduce to you all tonight the business bishop himself, Bishop Wayne Malcolm. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Hey, I'm super honored to be with you tonight and definitely looking forward to the Influence Summit on next week. So thank you ever so much. I'm deeply honored.
Yes, yes. We want to thank you so much for being with us tonight, and being a part of the Influence Summit. We were blessed by your presence last year, and we're excited about what's going to happen this year. So let's get into a conversation that I have been eagerly awaiting talking with you about, and I know that you're going to give us some incredible things next week. We are in the middle of like a global economic entrepreneurial shift, even. So many things are happening in our world economically, and so many changes are happening by the minute. Um, what is your observation of where we are, and what do we need to be thinking about and talking about right now, as a kingdom conscious community of those who are engaged within the marketplace space?
Wow, that's deep. First of all, to all of your guests and everyone that will catch the replays and everyone that will join us live, I greet you all the way from the United Kingdom, where it is freezing cold. But when it's winter, it is summer in my heart. As the old songwriter said. So, in terms of where we are at the moment. 2020, I kind of had a revelation that we were entering a decade of disruption, that it was going to be a disruptive decade. Of course, I had no idea that we were going into global lockdown due to the pandemic. But when the pandemic happened, it was clear to me that actually we had entered a decade of disruption. And the reason that it's such a disruptive decade is because we are at the dawn of a new age and of a new era, right? And as certainly a new economic age. And the world civilization has progressed through various economic ages and stages. So, of course, for thousands of years, we were agricultural, all right, and the wealthy, were landowners, and those that had the equipment to exploit the opportunity that land presented, and virtually anyone that commanded any wealth, they did it through ownership of land.
Mhm.
Then with the Industrial Revolution, um, we kind of shifted from farms to factories, right? Because we had entered the age of mass production and the age of steel and railroads and manufacturing goods, etc. The mass production of goods. Um, but that industrial revolution has seen several evolutions and revolutions, and we are now part of the digital age. And the digital age has made new tools available to us. It's made new things possible, but at the same time, it has made some old things completely obsolete. So
Mm.
we're all having to relearn some very basics in terms of communication, how we communicate with each other, particularly in the business space, how we do marketing, how we generate leads, how we make sales, how we position ourselves as visible, credible brands in this sort of attention economy where there's just millions of messages kind of attacking our mind on a daily basis. And we've kind of moved into this new era. And I guess some of us are still kind of trying to operate lanterns in an age of laser beams, right?
Wow.
So everything has changed, but we're often slow to realize that things have changed and to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. Typically, historically, we're just quite resistant to change, and we see change as a negative, change as something bad, right? And so we kind of fight to hold on to how things used to be, instead of realizing that there are waves right now, and it's very important that we recognize a wave so we can ride the wave. And so, in terms of what I think is happening at the moment, I think everyone is having to reinvent themselves. Every kind of a business, every kind of an organization, every institution is being forced to reinvent itself in the wake of a whole set of new digital realities, um, that are coming upon us with lightning speed. So I feel like we were going here anyway, but the pandemic accelerated the inevitable. So we were inevitably moving into the digital age, but the pandemic and the lockdown kind of forced us to go into stuff, right? So
Mhm.
most of us kind of learned Zoom and Restream and StreamYard and how to, you know, communicate with global audiences. Social media just began to explode, and it's been exploding for some time. But like everyone was forced to consume content from social media, in the lockdown. So it's kind of pushed us, where we were going, and we're having to get to grips with it. We're having to reinvent some things. We're having to change some of our strategies, our methodologies, and that doesn't mean changing mission, but it does mean we having to look at our methods, and we're kind of catching up. So that's why I kind of feel like things are.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what you shared, and I've had the privilege of conversing with you over the years, just around this, and you've written several books. One of them I absolutely love, as we talk about this evolution, this change, and how important it is for us to reinvent ourselves and reimagine and relook at some things in a very different way. How do we begin the process of adapting to these ever changing times in terms of the economic landscape and the business landscape? How do we position ourselves to adapt to what is happening? Um, what do we need to hold on to? What do we need to let go of?
Oh wow, that's another deep question. I feel like I'm getting some real deep questions here today. So I think the very first thing is very intentionally exposing ourselves to environments where we can even have these conversations, right?
Mhm.
I think that the Influence Summit is a great space. I feel like, it's going to help us with some of our blind spots, because a knowledge gap is one thing. A knowledge gap is where you know that you don't know something, but a blind spot is much worse, because it's
Mm,
you don't know that you don't know, right?
wow.
And when it comes to the digital age, the digital revolution, the fact that we are in it, we're at the dawn of it now, and it's only going to increase in its prevalence and its impact. Um, a lot of us simply don't know that we don't know certain things, right? So therefore, being in environments where things get discussed, where you start to realize that there are new ways to do old things, and those ways are cheaper, those ways are faster, those ways reach more of your target audience. um, I'm not even going to know that if I don't expose myself to environments where those things are being discussed.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to get in the right environment. I also think it's important, to become very intentional about learning new skills and about learning new technology and about learning new landscapes. And so that means, like, what podcasts are you subscribing to? What YouTube are you whose channels are you on? Are you simply using these for entertainment, or are you using them for education? So it's about saying, okay, look, I need to become a learner again. I need to become a student, because the rules have changed and the goalposts have moved. Given that the rules have changed and the goalposts have moved, the onus is upon me to become a student again. And that requires humility and simply accepting the reality that actually things are not going back to how they were. They're going forward into ever more complex modes, complex ideas. So I think that's probably the starting point, getting the right environment where you can be exposed to conversations that address those blind spots, and begin to follow intentionally those thought leaders who are able to keep you current or even get you ahead of the curve. And then finally, it's just, don't be afraid. Do not fear technology. Do not fear changing landscapes, right? And don't buy into the lie that actually you're going to be worse off, right? You need to realize that actually disruption in business terms really speaks to an opportunity, right? An opportunity. It's almost like a reset, right?
Yes.
It's a reset. So you had certain industries, certain companies, certain products, certain services that kind of dominated the landscape. But with disruption, there's an innovation, there's a significant improvement on the product or the process or the business model that kind of resets everything, and now gives people an opportunity to get in to the business, at the ground level. And so actually I see this as a time of opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And I think that um that stars, as people say, the stars come out at night, right? Well, they don't. Okay, they were there the whole time.
Yes.
They just become visible at night
Wow.
because of the backdrop of darkness,
Yes.
because of the contrast that gives it the backdrop, so you can see it. And I feel like disruption is like a form of darkness. It's a backdrop that actually allows us to see the rising stars.
Hmm.
And so we need to see this as a time of opportunity. We need to become very optimistic. We don't need to be afraid of new things or new technology. We need to know that actually, if people are using it, then we can, with a few lessons, learn to use it to our own advantage. And yeah, so I guess environment, mentors, being intentional about growing, and just losing the fear and realizing that actually this is your day. I'd say that's a good starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanna jump back a brief moment here, because I do want to. I think sometimes, it's important for people to understand the connection of how we've arrived at some of these understandings. I know that my introduction to you was through reading several of your books, and I've heard this said that once people find you, and your voice is an answer to something that they've been looking for, they bend you, right? They read and look at everything. And so one of the books that I needed to, from listening to you and even being with you there in London a few times, I said, man, I need to know, where did this journey begin for him? Because sometimes people meet you at a spot and they think you've always been there. It's like, no, no, no. There was a route to get here. And your book, The Butterfly Secret,
Mm,
was a powerful. I mean, I've read all of your stuff, but that one was eye opening to how you got to where you are in terms of your evolution
yeah,
from a spiritual experience with knowing the Lord, but really being tied into some religious systems
yeah,
and some realities, that we hit those points of a barrier. I'm gonna mention something you said on Instagram today, but you hit that point of a barrier, and you realize, man, there's something I'm missing on this. If you talk to us a few moments just around that turning point for you, that point of revolution, where you realized, this is something I'm missing here.
Yeah, well, I came to Christ, as a teenager. I was like 16 years old, and God found me. I was invited to a service, and I only went to the service because the young lady that invited me seemed pretty attractive, and at that age, I wasn't in control of much, and I thought, well. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So I'll go to the service, and then we can exchange numbers, and maybe you'll come to one of my services. Okay. So that was my thinking. I was quite a tearaway. I was this very rebellious young man. Anyway, I went to the service, and God met me there. I was very convicted. I experienced the presence of God, had an encounter with God, ended up in the altar, ended up on my knees, ended up, committing to Christ. And I guess that was the beginning of the journey. The church that I began to attend was old school. Okay.
Mhm.
Like deeply old school, very Caribbean in character, and had this really extreme emphasis on separation from the world, on the
Mm,
imminent return of Christ, on holiness, on being ready for the rapture, keeping yourself separate, keeping yourself pure. And so I inherited a very separatist mindset, and
mm.
um, to a degree quite legalistic, because actually we weren't gonna be saved unless we kept all these rules. So
Wow.
we literally, we had to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, we had to be baptized, we had to be spirit filled, and then we had to keep all the rules, right? And if we kept all the rules, even then the righteous would be scarcely saved. Okay, so we were always terrified that we were going to hell. so I was young. I was a teenager, and so a lot of things that maybe I could have or should have taken some time to consider, I didn't, right? So but at the same time, I was on fire. I was on fire for God, and began preaching sermons at like 17 years old. I was a boy preacher.
Mhm.
And then I had an opportunity in financial services, and so I was a independent, self-employed sales professional, working with a multinational financial services company. And I learned financial language. I learned some financial literacy,
Mm,
and I learned how to sell financial products. So whether they were pensions or mortgages or investments or various forms of insurance and assurance, we had a full portfolio of services and so on. So we were selling them. Now, it was really at that point I became aware of a conflict in myself, right? I was somewhat
mm.
conflicted. Conflicted because I was selling people products that would mature in 20 or 30 years, right? Um, or 10 years. And actually, I believe that Jesus was coming
Who's
tonight.
coming soon? Yes.
Okay. He's coming tonight or tomorrow night at the worst case. But here I am selling these products. And I just got conflicted. So even though I was making a lot of money, I was doing really well, I was learning a lot of skills. I let go of that and went full time into the ministry. Went into the ministry, like 21 years old. Got married like 21 years old.
Wow.
So I'm a kid, like doing a lot of big things, right? I've earned a lot of money, but I am just doing what I need to do in order to be saved and to be ready for that rapture, for
Mm,
that trumpet, right? Anyway, that went on. Church grew. Church grew, became quite an outstanding church. Some people call it a mega church. Eventually, we were up over 1,000 people. We were just growing and growing and growing, right? And then, I hit like a time of crisis, a time of uncertainty. I began questioning the doctrines of
Mhm.
the church. I questioned the traditions of the church. Um, I was dealing with a lot of internal conflict around a whole, world of issues, and I was just literally personally going downhill internally, psychologically.
Mhm.
Outside, I looked amazing, but I was just going downhill. Anyway, the depression was there, and I wrote about being depressed in my book, right?
Mhm.
And thank God I don't haven't had any depression since deliverance, right? But I was depressed. The marriage ended. I found myself alone, just questioning the meaning of life. I mean,
Mm.
questioning absolutely everything. And I kind of went on a search. And in that search, I put everything I believed, everything on
Mm.
trial for its life.
Wow.
Like, right. Whatever I think I believe, it's questionable. Okay. And so I went into a season of study, and in that season had a few encounters with God, and I discovered the kingdom. I discovered the gospel of the kingdom. I
Mm.
discovered the grace of God. I discovered something that was worth living for, and I wanted to live again. Right?
Mm.
I got delivered from this wanting to check out, wanting to die. I wanted to live, because I begin to understand Jesus in a whole new dimension, the gospel in a whole new dimension, the agenda in a whole new dimension, and pretty much then committed my life to the kingdom. So in that particular book, I guess the subtitle of the book is My Journey from Religion to Revolution.
Mhm.
So I kind of came out of it somewhat of a revolutionary. And yeah, it's been a wonderful journey since. I still want to
Mhm.
live. I want to live. I want to be part of what God is doing in the world. I love what God is up to. I'm no longer focused on or obsessing about what the devil is up to, because
Yes.
I think that whatever the devil's doing in the world is nothing
Thing.
compared to what God's up to. And when I was like stooped into the legalism and all of that, uh, you know, all we could see was what was the devil up to, was the Antichrist was going to come, was the mark of the beast
Mhm.
going to come, was the world government and all of these different things, and all we could see was negativity.
Mhm.
When I discovered the kingdom, I could see like to me, God's agenda was infinitely more worthy of my attention than anything the devil was up to.
Wow.
So um I guess it was at that point that I realized that my training and my learning in financial services was going to serve me in terms of my destiny.
Mhm.
Because I always had so much respect for entrepreneurs. Like when that stint that I did as self-employed, independent financial services advisor, that in that time I was reading all the success classics, I was attending seminars, and I was developing this amazing mindset. So in that period, I went back to that, and I quickly discovered, just to bring a long story, make it very short, I quickly discovered that there was a whole lot of the Bible in business, and there was a
Yes.
whole lot of business in the Bible. Like
Mm.
these weren't two separate worlds.
Yes.
Okay, these were two sides of the same coin, right? I begin to realize that it is the spiritual that gives meaning to the material, but it is the material that gives expression to the spiritual.
Yes.
And so material things without spiritual meaning are dead. But spiritual things without material expression are insignificant. And
Mhm.
so I began to fuse. I began to fuse. I began to see so many success principles in the Bible. I began to see so many business strategies and systems in the Bible. I began to see like encoded, encrypted concepts for creating massive value,
Yes.
leadership, management. All of it was there in the Bible. And I'm like, you know what? I love both of these things. I really love both of these things. I tried to keep them apart for years. You know, I got on the motivational circuit. I was doing motivational speaking. I was doing coaching, sales training in the secular. And then I'd be in church preaching, right? And I tried to keep them apart. And when it dawned upon me that they're actually not separate worlds,
Mm.
and I begin to unashamedly turn up at the secular seminar and say, I'm about Christ right now. Christ is my great role model. Christ is the ultimate entrepreneur. And the Bible is where I got these secrets. I begin to say it there, right?
Yeah.
And I begin to bring some very practical principles into the church world. I realized that actually I don't need to split me in two. I need to be
That's
one
so
of the same person. And that's
Bishop.
how I
That's
got
so good.
called the business bishop.
That's
Come on
so, you said so many things that I want to dive into. I'm gonna try to pick one or two, but you know, so when I had the opportunity, so here's what happened and how I really came across your ministry. I had a guy who was doing some photography for me, and I just moved to Atlanta. He was doing some work with me. He would hear my messages and what I would talk about, and he said, "Man, you sound like this pastor in North Carolina. It sound like this guy in North Carolina." I said, "Well, who is this guy?" So he said, "Man, this Pastor Anthony Knotts. Shout out to
My
Pastor
guy.
Knotts." He said, "Man, you sound like him. I gotta connect y'all." So he connected us on social media. Got on the phone with him. He said, "Man, we were talking and we were literally exchanging ideas. It was just like, it's kind of like when you meet someone who you felt like, especially within the church dynamic, like I'm an alien in this thing. Like I'm totally out of joint, right?" And so he said, "Man, but you got to meet my bishop." I said, "Well, who's your bishop? Because if you talking like this, then I definitely have to meet him." And he mentioned you. We got on the phone maybe a few days later, and you told me you were having something. I flew there.
You
One
did.
of our leaders, Dr. Jamie. Shout out to Dr. Jamie. Uh, she said, "Bishop, I'm gonna make sure you get there." I got there. I didn't know anybody in London. Never been to London before. Figured out my way to the hotel, and we met. And as I began to hear, prior to that, I'd already read all like 4 or 5 books. Okay, the New Game. I mean, I read everything. Okay, and so when I got there, I felt a sense of relief because what I recognized, and I think God does this with all of us, right? He'll have us in these silo spaces to give us a revelation so that we are not necessarily an echo of anyone else, but we can actually carry that message with a sense of clarity, with a sense of confidence. But I said, man, the church will never receive what I'm talking about. This is just this. I'll never preach for anybody really. So I'm just gonna have to figure out how to be out here on this island until I met you, and it gave a real sense of clarity for me um, around it. Because what was happening was so many people either box you into just being a business guy,
Yep.
right, or a preacher, but you cannot be both.
No,
And I mean, you can't be both. And I never forget. The Lord said to me one time, Bishop, he said, "There is no secular and sacred. There's only sacred.
I love it.
Everything is sacred to me.
I love it.
Business is sacred. Entertainment is sacred. Media,
Woo!
all these things are sacred to me.
Preach.
They're not secular. They're not, right? And so when I really began to receive that, because like you, I was divided. I would preach one thing in the church, and then I'm a business guy over here, but I saw so many principles within the scriptures. Case in point, you and I talked about this before. Jesus chooses entrepreneurs. Why didn't he choose priests? Right? This is a faith mission. Why wouldn't he choose priests? Right? He chooses these entrepreneurial figures. And then this, you blew us away last year when you said in the subconscious of the faith we've inherited is this idea that poverty is holy. Um, Talk to us just a little around that. Why do we ascribe to some of these ideas and in some ways demonize the idea of prosperity, especially for people who are ministers or people of faith who lead the church dynamic? And it's almost like it's evil. I never forget one of the leaders, I'll say this point, then let you speak here. One of the leaders I work with in Africa, he shared with me, he said, hey man, listen, we the way I was raised, we had to make a decision. We either had to be in this or we had to be fully given to the work of God. We could not do both. He said, but this generation is saying not so.
That's right.
Why is it that we ascribe to some of these things and almost unwilling to part from them, although our reality puts us in a position where we're really suffering?
Yeah, that's really good, brother. That's really, really good. So, and I guess I've devoted quite a bit of my life and work to helping believers to demolish the divide between their work and their faith, and to reconcile at a very deep level their faith with their fortune.
Mm-hmm.
Now, actually, I didn't even realize I was conflicted until a friend who is a Jewish rabbi, he told me categorically, "You are conflicted." Okay.
Wow.
He said, and I won't call his name, but he's a famous author, right? He said, Wayne, he said, I inherited an advantage when it came to a business and prosperity and financial success. He said, I inherited an advantage. He said, in my religion, money is good. This is a good thing. He says, he said, gold is the universal symbol of wealth. And the first time it's mentioned in the Bible says it is good.
Wow.
All right. He said, it is for me a moral and religious obligation to create value for my fellows in exchange for money, and money would be the reflection of the value that I create for them.
Wow.
And I am encouraged to do so by my religion, right? This is a Jewish rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
And again, while he's speaking, like these fireworks are going off in me, because I had already reached the conclusion that the old covenant was fundamentally a commercial covenant, right? In that there was no heaven to gain or hell to shun.
Wow.
Right? All there was the blessings of obedience and the curses of disobedience. And when you looked at the blessings of obedience, they all had to do with a better quality of life. And the curses of disobedience had to do with a diminishing quality of life. So if you were obedient, you were going to be blessed in the city, in the field, when you come and when you go. You were going to be healthy. You were going to be wealthy. You're going to have children. You're going to live a long life. You're going to have all of these things, but they're all quality of life issues, right? Whereas the curses of disobedience were that it would be an absence of those things. And so while he's speaking to me and saying, look, I am encouraged to create value, to find solutions for my fellows as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. And he says, I'm not morally conflicted about that, because creating wealth, he said to me, creating wealth through serving your fellow man is inherently moral.
Wow.
He began to speak to me about the inherent morality of doing business, of creating wealth, of creating prosperity for your family, for your community. And he said to me, a good man, a good person will leave an inheritance to his children's children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He said, but you, he said, you're conflicted. Because in your mind, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. For you, the love of money is the root of all evil, and all you've grown up on is negativity when it comes to money.
Mm-hmm.
And this, of course, set me on a search because I couldn't deny the fact that I had inherited a lot of negative ideas about money, about wealth, about prosperity. I had inherited them. And even if they weren't in my conscious mind, they were somewhere in my subconscious mind,
Mm-hmm.
making me a double-minded man,
Yes.
unstable in all his ways and unable to receive wisdom from God, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go through all those passages. I had to go through the Greek. I had to go through the context. I had to look at the manners and customs of the time. I had to apply my hermeneutics. And I started to see there is nothing in the New Testament discouraging the believer
Wow.
from creating
Wow.
generational wealth. Nothing. Actually, the warnings are all about wealth about money. There's no warnings about wealth. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference between wealth, riches, and money, right?
Yes.
The warnings are about money having you,
Mm-hmm.
not about you having money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? No man can serve two masters,
Yes.
right? So you cannot work for money, but it doesn't mean that money cannot work
And
for you.
for you, yes.
Jesus said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the question. Where is the rich man?
Wow.
Where is he in that passage? He's
Wow.
outside the kingdom.
Wow.
It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man who's not in the kingdom to enter in the kingdom. He's not speaking about
Wow.
wealth you create in the
In the
kingdom.
kingdom.
He's talking about wealth you acquire outside the kingdom. It's hard for you because the principles and the protocols of the kingdom don't allow for fraud and theft and all of these
Yes.
things that you could have built your wealth outside the kingdom. You're gonna have to let go of that to come into the kingdom, and some people won't. It's hard for them to let
Mm-hmm.
go of that way to come into the kingdom. But this is not speaking about people who are in the kingdom.
Wow, Bishop. So this further explains the encounter that Jesus has with Zacchaeus, because he then, after that encounter with Jesus, says, "Oh no, I have to go back and make this right." But see, the thing, even in that, even if someone's listening and that's their situation, right? If you knew how to acquire it by means that were not righteous, now that you have a set of values and principles to live by, you can take that same innovation, that same level of strategy and thought process with godly values, with kingdom values, and build and amass that wealth in a way that lets you sleep at night.
Absolutely.
You know, and so good. Let me tell you, last year, the Influence Summit session that you did 2 sessions with us, it was so good. My children, I have 4 children, okay? I've got a 20-year-old, I got twins that are 15, and I got an 8-year-old. He was 7 then. He said to my wife, he said, I wonder how much wealth Solomon had. It's a 7-year-old. I want you to understand how the message impacted everyone. He starts to look it up and said Solomon was a multi-trillionaire.
Yeah,
This is my son.
that's true.
and and we went from that point of hearing your session that the saying around our house is, "We are very righteous and very rich."
Yeah.
My whole family says it. We're very righteous and very rich because it helped us to reclaim a reality that I don't have to divorce these two things, right?
You really don't. And if I can just jump in,
Yes, go. Yes.
Bishop, and say, look, that phrase that I used, very righteous and very rich, it was Abraham, right? You know,
Yeah.
the Bible says that Abraham
Mm-hmm.
was very rich. It doesn't say he was rich. It says he was
Mm-hmm.
very rich. And just in case someone want to spiritualize that and say, well, he was rich in faith, he was rich in
Yes.
humility, he was rich in, no, it says what he was rich in. He was rich in silver, gold, cattle. We also know that he dug wells.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham was very rich, and yet he was the father of the faith movement. He's the
Yes.
father of the faithful. He's the patriarch for all of us.
Yes.
The Bible says he was a friend of God.
Wow.
He was a friend of God. So you can be very rich and be a friend of God.
Yes.
All right. You don't have to be poor to be a friend of God. And of course, historically, a lot of Christian tradition taught that the more detached you are from the material world is the closer you're going to be to God.
Yes.
So people felt like, well, if I'm going to be close to God, I need to be completely detached, i.e., own nothing, control nothing, robe, sandals, be content with such things as I have.
Mm-hmm.
And many priests were made to take a vow of poverty in order to enter the ministry. Because the
Yes.
only way you could be spiritual is if you were completely detached from the material world.
Yes.
And of course, all of that was an instrument of social control. It was a weapon of mass instruction. It was actually the ruling classes using religion to control the masses, right? To justify why they were rich and the masses were poor. So a lot of these doctrines were coming out of political agendas.
Mm-hmm.
But the church world inherited that. And we're coming out of that now. We're saying, now, hold on. If that's true, how was Abraham the friend of God?
Yes.
And if that's true, how did Joseph own a country called
Yes.
Goshen in the land of Egypt? Why did the Israelites come out of Egypt with so much gold that they could make a golden calf, right? And then go on to actually make the Ark of the Covenant and the furniture in the tabernacle that was overlaid with gold?
Yes.
Why is it that King Solomon is the richest man that ever lived? Why is it that so many of our patriarchs and biblical role models actually commanded huge resources and were phenomenally wealthy?
Yeah.
And then you realize, actually, perhaps what we were taught, right, has kept us back, has
Yes.
held us back, and has delivered to us some very unhelpful beliefs that have rendered us impotent to influence society. Because you
Yes.
can't influence society without economic authority. You
Yes.
simply can't. And when the Bible says the poor man's wisdom is despised and his words are not heard, it simply means you don't have the ability to influence a society until you have some economic authority.
Absolutely.
And that's what the
Absolutely.
devil didn't want us to have, is
Absolutely.
economic authority.
You know, there's a scripture that I bring up often. It's in the book of Ecclesiastes, and it states that a poor man by his wisdom delivered a city, but was not remembered.
That's the guy.
And there's a whole lot to that. But I make the statement often to people that if you meet two people in a day, one rich and one poor, who will you remember? You're going to remember the rich man, right? And that's reality. And this man wasn't remembered, even though by his wisdom, he helped this city, this whole city that was in trouble, get out of trouble by his wisdom. And one of the challenges I think happens is that just because you have a gift or ability, talent, or what have you, and it's being utilized to help, doesn't mean you shouldn't send an invoice. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have some value placed on what it is that you provide, and stand in a certain level of confidence that this is what this is worth. And I said, you know what was it really worth to that city that this man leveraged his wisdom to help them get out of trouble, right? The issue is not that the city didn't recognize that he didn't, and it left him in a space where no one even remembered that he did that deed. And so I really believe that, this is a space where we no longer need to be working for, but we need to be in a position to have resources working for us. And so just last year was so powerful. We had so many points that really impacted us. We still talk today in some of our meetings and times together about it. As we look at Influence Summit 2025, our theme this year is framing the future. And we're addressing this from the standpoint of mental health, ministry, and the marketplace. Bishop Malcolm will be with us, and he's going to have an afternoon session and then an evening time of gathering. The evening time will be open to the public. We'll share that information in a few moments. Bishop, what can we expect as we talk around some of the marketplace? I know we've touched some things now, but what can we expect in our time with you next week in these sessions in the Influence Summit?
Well, you can expect that I am not holding back. I am not flying halfway across the world to hold back anything, right? I am praying into the space, and there are some subjects that I want to present and unpack that I think will have a lasting impact on the audience. I also want to go beyond philosophy and principles and ideology, and I want to deliver some strategy, some applicable, practical steps that people can make to fulfill their personal assignments and achieve much higher levels of success. And this is not success without significance. It's not success for success' sake, because success for the believer is not a goal. It is a gateway. All right. It's not a destiny. It's a doorway. It's not our purpose. It's our platform. And when you think of success as a gateway, as a doorway, as a platform, it means that there's something beyond success. And beyond success is a very powerful place of purpose that's called significance.
Yes.
Right? And I think it's very important that we become significant in every sector, in every industry, in every sphere of social influence, that we become significant. And to become significant, you need to become visible. You need to be visible and audible. You need to be credible, and you need to establish your authority in that field. So I really want to talk about perhaps my favorite subject and my personal obsession, right? So I have a personal obsession, which I don't mind throwing out there. Okay. So I am a thought leadership coach, right? And I help entrepreneurs to become thought leaders. And I help thought leaders to monetize their ideas and their expertise. I think last year I spoke about putting your water into bottles, your content into containers. And your water stands for your wisdom, your advice, your teaching or training, your expertise, and your revelation. Those things, they're going to die with you unless you put that content into containers and make them available so people can consume and glean from that. So I help thought leaders to monetize their ideas. And I also help business owners. I help business owners to use thought leadership as a marketing tool and method for scaling their business, because it's now the fastest way to scale a
Yes.
business is to become a thought leader in that space, right? So I do want to address thought leadership,
Yes.
because for me, if there's a business of the Bible, all right, now there are lots of business models in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
particularly farming and fishing, right? And there are crafts people in the Bible, and there are just lots of businesses in the Bible. But if there is an overarching business of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
it's thought leadership. Okay. Now, first of all, what is the Bible, right? So it's the book. It's the
Yes.
book of books. There's 66
Mm-hmm.
books. What's the point of the book? Influence your ideas and your thinking,
Yes.
right? So even God is into thought leadership, right? That's how God
Mm.
leads us through our
Yes.
thought. But what was it that put Joseph in the palace and gave him access to tremendous riches? It was his thought leadership in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that actually prevented the genocide in the book of Esther? It was Esther's ability to influence the thinking of a king.
Yes.
What was it that made Daniel president of the princes in Persia and second in command to the king only?
Mm-hmm.
His thought leadership. Where did Solomon get his wealth? His thought
Yes.
leadership. So I want to address thought leadership because I feel like lots of us have wisdom inside of us,
Mm-hmm.
revelation, experience that we don't know how to monetize. And we're looking for a product to sell, we're looking for a service to render, when actually there is untold wealth in between your ears, untold wealth in your life, if only you knew what to do with it. So I want to address that somewhat. And I want to do what we do in our ministry, demolish the divide
Yes.
between your work and your faith.
Yes.
End the conflict, the internal conflict that has you moving with doubt and uncertainty when it comes to wealth creation and generational wealth creation, influence, leadership, and power. We need to resolve that internal conflict so that our work becomes a part of our faith,
Yes.
and so that we are going full speed ahead, nothing internally holding us back, and
Yeah.
we're doing it with the joy of the Lord.
Yes. Yes. Well, listen, you all, as you watch this replay or even check it out now, I encourage you to register for the Influence Summit. Now, here's the deal. We sent out a message that we were closing registration today. We are extending it just one more day to give you an opportunity to register for the Influence Summit. We're going to be here in the metro Atlanta area, Douglasville Conference Center in Douglasville, Georgia, just 30 minutes outside of the city of Atlanta, west of Atlanta. We are going to be hosting it here. We open up Friday, 8 a.m. We have sessions that are happening. Lunch will be provided to you, a full Southern style buffet lunch. So if you've never been to the Southeast,
Woo!
you're in for a treat. Come on and be with us. If you're in the Atlanta area, it's going to be incredible. We have several folks who are going to be there. Now, if you are able to handle being challenged, being stretched, this is a room for those who are really ready to excel. Not just living, not just dream about the dream, but actually see legs and arms being put to your dream and it becoming a reality. There are testimonies of people who came last year who heard from Bishop Malcolm and others, and they can give you testimony of transformation, things that have actually happened, things they've produced as a result. Many people talk about the marketplace and can give you great philosophies and great ideas and great revelation, but to produce is what is necessary. The Bible says that God says to Adam, be fruitful and multiply, to be productive. We want you to leave this gathering now able to produce something that you can look back and say, I see the fruit of that investment. So we encourage you to be there Friday, 8 until 3. We will have sessions. These are exclusive and really going to be life changing. Friday evening at 6:30. We'll be gathering in the evening. It is open to the public. Now, this is the one time we've not ever done this before. We typically have kept these registered and exclusive, but Friday evening is open to the public. Bishop Malcolm, the business bishop, you heard it for yourself today. He's going to be sharing with us. I'm looking forward. We're going to have prayer, we're going to have worship, but he's going to share with us and he's going to really minister to us in that space. I'm telling you, you're going to be blessed. And then Saturday, we are gathering. One of my mentors who I love will be with us, Bishop Ralph Dennis. He wrote a book called Marketplace Jesus. It was one of the first books I ever read on the marketplace. Out of Baltimore, Maryland. He'll be with us. We have several leaders that are part of our network. This is hosted by the Imprint Life Global Network. So we will be ordaining some leaders that are both, I call them hybrid leaders. They are both marketplace and ministry leaders. We'll be ordaining them. But it will be an incredible time. We're expecting to hear some great things. And I pray you'll be with us. The information is on the screen, nathanculver.tv/mastery coaching. Go there to register for the conference. If you're coming in from out of town, as soon as you register, our system will shoot you an email with the host hotel information. We want you to be with us. Bishop, do you have any last thoughts you want to share with us as we close our time together today?
Just to say that I regard it an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to be with you and your great network. I met so many outstanding leaders, very authentic, very genuine people, both in marketplace and in the ministry. And I think it is a great place of purpose and field of favor that I wish many more believers would become aware of. I think the more gatherings of this nature and the more conversations of this nature, I feel like it's the better we will all be. So it's my honor to be there. And anyone that's on the fence about whether you should be there, listen, I'm flying all the way from London to be there, not just to share, but
Yes.
to learn and to glean. I think it's a gathering of very brilliant minds and very genuine stories. And so I want to be there. And I'd love to see you there if you're listening to this, and perhaps you're one of my students, perhaps you're in one of my continuity programs, or even in my inner circle. If you're anywhere near the Atlanta area, you need to meet me there. All right. Bless you so much. Thank you, Apostle Nathan.
Thank you, Bishop. I'm excited. Looking forward to being with you all next Friday. We open the Influence Summit. I'm excited about it. Looking forward to being with you. I hope you are blessed and that you go forth and prosper.